The story begins with a high school boy who has lost hope in his future. He is watching anime in his bed when suddenly his screen hits 110% brightness and he passes away. When he opens his eyes, he finds a beautiful angel congratulating him on being selected to be reincarnated. She explains that the new world runs on magic and he will be granted powerful skills to begin his new life. However, even after being provided with such a great opportunity, Haruto plans to use his overpowered skills to live a lazy life. He wakes up as a newborn prince named Reinhardt, son of King Jilk and the champion who defeated the demon king, Queen Gizelot. The king is overexcited with the birth of his heir, and quickly asks for a magic assessment to find out how powerful he is. But the magic orb says that the child's magic level is only level 2, and he can only use barrier magic. His parents are too embarrassed to call him their son, so they plan to tell everyone that Reinhardt died during childbirth. The king orders his servants to leave the baby in the forest. In heaven, the angel who reincarnated Reinhardt comes running to another angel. She sees that Reinhardt's parents failed to recognize his true potential. The magic crystal in their world that measures power level can only measure power in 2 digits. She reveals that she gave Reinhardt a magic level of 1002, which is higher than the gods. Reinhardt finds himself in the middle of a forest. But with his knowledge still intact from his previous life, he tries to use barrier magic and is easily able to wield his power using his imagination. He creates a barrier around him to keep himself safe from an animal attack. When he says animal, a huge red wolf appears behind his floating body and tries to eat him, but the barrier he created saves him. However, the wolf doesn't back off and tries attacking Reinhardt again, but Reinhardt uses his barrier magic to ward off the attack. The wolf doesn't go away, so Reinhardt uses his magic to lift an entire hill and is about to finish off the wolf when the wolf speaks for the first time, saying it surrenders. Reinhardt is amazed to hear the oversized animal speak, and they come to a truce. The wolf explains that she wanted to eat him to restore her mana, but she clearly underestimated the baby's strength. Reinhardt thinks about saying his name, and then decides to introduce himself using his former life's name, Haruto. He tells the wolf how he was banished because he has low mana, but the wolf refuses to believe him as he is radiating a ridiculous amount of mana. Suddenly the wolf comes up with a bizarre explanation that Haruto might be the demon king reincarnated. Haruto doesn't want the wolf to know what a loser he was in his previous life, so he plays along and says he is the demon lord. He is surprised the wolf believes him so easily, and the wolf admits defeat and asks him to kill her. Haruto thinks this is excessive and refuses, and the wolf is touched by his generosity and swears to keep him safe. The wolf introduces herself as Flame Fenrir, and when Haruto calls her Flay, the wolf tells Haruto that a contract has been made between the two, since he gave her a name, and she will serve him for the rest of her life as his familiar. Haruto says all he did was shorten her name, but he suddenly collapses because his baby body is hungry, and he asks Flay to feed him. Flay immediately transforms into a woman and offers her jugs, but she doesn't understand how a human body works, and Haruto tells her to put on some clothes. Flay apologizes, and Haruto magically creates clothes, but thinks it's even sexier. Flay hears someone approaching, and he introduces himself as Count Gold Zenfris, a relative of the king. He has come to secretly save the baby, after learning that the king abandoned him, but Flay refuses. Gold tells her how his wife was once pregnant, but their child didn't survive, so she gives in and agrees with Gold's proposal to adopt the baby and take Flay as his attendant. It has been 9 years since Gold took Haruto in. Haruto lives with Gold, his mother Natalia, and his sister Charlotte. Haruto had initially planned to leave early, but the family's love made him stick around a little longer. The only problem is that he thinks Charlotte doesn't like him, but Natalia dismisses the idea and says Charlotte is shy and doesn't know how to act around boys of his age. Haruto is convinced that Charlotte can sense his former life's age, which would have been 30 by now, which is why she hates him. During his time with the family, Haruto masters barrier magic and has created a robot clone of himself for when he leaves, so no one in the family gets hurt, but he forgets to make one for Flay, as he knows she will follow him wherever he goes. Just as he fears, Gold calls for him and declares that today he'll begin Haruto's sword lessons. But Gold is shocked when Haruto strikes the floor and creates a massive hole and dodges an attack that is impossible for anyone under level 30 to dodge. His dad is confused, but tells him he will turn Haruto into an elite swordsman. That evening, Gold is concerned that Haruto might be a returned demon, which explains why Flay is fond of Haruto. But even if that's true, the couple promises to make their son's life a happy one. Gold has been busy lately, and Haruto has nothing to do all day except lie on his bed. Suddenly, he hears a commotion, so he uses his barrier magic and creates cameras. He sees many soldiers lying injured, as nurses tend to their wounds. Haruto goes to meet his father, who tells him there have been a series of attacks by thieves in their province. Gold and his men headed there only to be ambushed. Gold feels guilty for leading his men directly into a trap, and asks Haruto to go inside, as it might be too much for a 9-year-old to take. Haruto does as he is told, but as he passes the injured, he casts his magic on them, and their wounds miraculously heal, dumbfounded Gold. Later that night, Haruto calls for Flay, and using his shield cameras, he scans the entire province, and finds a group in a fort amidst the jungle. They immediately leave to teach them a lesson for what they did to his dad. But Charlotte sees them flying out of the castle in the middle of the night. Haruto and Flay reach their base, and using his barrier magic, Haruto freezes their chief and 2 other men. He forces them to reveal their purpose, and learns they are soldiers from the neighboring kingdom, who plan to infiltrate their kingdom disguised as thieves. Their goal is to create madness within the kingdom, and private information is brought to them by a mystery man. But they don't know who that person is, and Haruto asks Flay to burn down their fort, since they got the information they are looking for. The next morning, Gold gets an anonymous letter stating that the enemy troops were destroyed, and the entire fort was burnt to the ground. Gold orders an interrogation of the survivors they captured, and he is concerned, since the letter says an entire nation is involved in the conspiracy. He has no doubt that Flay burned down the fort, and fears Flay's strength is far superior to his. Charlotte suddenly gets off her father's lap, and excuses herself. She rushes to Flay and asks her if there are 2 Harutos, because last night she saw them flying away in the middle of the night, but when she went to check Haruto's room, she found him sleeping, though she couldn't sense the aura from the sleeping Haruto as she normally does. Flay brags about Haruto and tells Charlotte that since childhood, Haruto has been blessed with mana that far exceeds normal humans. But she cannot reveal Haruto's true identity, and warns Charlotte not to worry about such things. Flay immediately goes to Haruto to tell him about Charlotte's curiosity, and that she can sense his aura, so Haruto decides to increase the surveillance on Charlotte. He also plans to confront her, but when he finally gets the chance, Charlotte flees, leaving him hanging. It has been 6 days, and Charlotte has been following him everywhere, but when she doesn't show up on the 7th day, the roles flip, and we see Haruto spying on her. The next day at breakfast, Gold informs Haruto that Charlotte and her mother are going to an annual festival. Gold usually makes the journey, but he's sending Natalia and Charlotte on his behalf this year. Haruto insists on sending Flay with them, but remembers he has already given her errands to keep the monsters from attacking their town. In the evening, Haruto is slacking off, when he gets an emergency update from the surveillance he put on Charlotte. Their group is under attack, and with no one left to protect them, Charlotte and Natalia are surrounded by enemies. Natalia tries to run away with Charlotte in her arms, but gets wounded by an enemy attack. But she doesn't give up and keeps running, when Charlotte hears a voice, and guides her to a place they can hide. Once inside a cave, Natalia leaves Charlotte there while she goes to find the person who is helping them. Natalia believes whoever he is, he will help them fight injustice. After a teary goodbye, Natalia leaves the cave, and is stunned to see that the entrance of the cave is guarded with illusionary magic, which is advanced magic. But she finds herself surrounded by the enemy, and in order to avoid being captured, she takes out her knife to end her life, but before she can off herself, the knife shatters into thousands of pieces. Natalia falls unconscious as she has used up all her mana, but Haruto arrives right on time to avoid letting his unconscious mother fall to the ground. He looks furious, and with the power of his voice, he throws the enemy soldiers several feet in the air. Haruto brings Natalia inside the cave, and asks Charlotte to take care of her until he finishes off the enemy. Charlotte is alarmed at the amount of aura she feels from Haruto, but she gathers up her courage, and speaks to Haruto for the first time. They could have had any conversation, but when Charlotte asks Haruto if he is the hero of justice, he is dumbfounded. He doesn't want his first conversation with his sister to go down the drain, so he plays along and says he is indeed the hero of justice. Charlotte's eyes light up, and she realizes how naive she has been, and feels silly that she thought he was evil. She promises to keep his secret even from their dad, making Haruto a little embarrassed. He decides to adopt the persona of the delusional character Charlotte has created in her mind. That evening, Gold is presented with a report of the incident, and once again their injured soldiers were healed spontaneously. Gold understands that their mystery helper has no intention of revealing himself, and asks Haruto for his opinion on everything that is happening lately. Haruto almost reveals himself when he mentions that Imperial soldiers attacked Natalia and Charlotte. Gold asks him how he knows they were Imperial soldiers, but Haruto shifts Gold's focus to tightening the security at the borders. Gold is worried that the enemy has already infiltrated their province. Haruto does his best to lead Gold to answer his own question, and finally, Gold understands that there is a spy among them, who is giving the enemy information about their plans. But before he can reveal the person he thinks is a spy, Natalia and Charlotte arrive with Flay, and Charlotte hugs Haruto, claiming she loves him now, surprising their parents. Flay is jealous and asks Charlotte to keep her hands off her master, but Haruto doesn't mind the attention at all. Since then, Haruto has been enjoying Charlotte's undivided attention, and didn't know she could be so clingy, but he doesn't mind and thinks it's like being at a petting zoo. Charlotte gets distracted by the surveillance screen, and asks if it is the ancient magic he has been studying, something Haruto had made up to avoid giving an explanation about how he spends his time. Charlotte tells him about some books where he can learn about ancient magic, and takes him to the castle library. She gets all the necessary books, and asks Haruto to read them to her. While reading, Haruto is reminded of anime, and wishes he could see it in this world. Charlotte seems interested in anime, and asks Haruto to explain what it is. Haruto tries his best to explain how anime is made, and Charlotte seems fascinated by such magic. After learning more about ancient magic, Haruto manages to get a modern Japanese internet connection. Since his streaming subscription is still active, he creates a children's account for Charlotte, and lets her watch anime. Charlotte is mesmerized by the moving pictures, but she doesn't understand Japanese, so Haruto teaches her the basics. Charlotte proves to be a genius, as she learns Japanese in just 2 weeks by watching anime, and searching for the meaning of the words she finds difficult to understand. Seeing Charlotte enjoy watching TV makes Haruto happy, but his big brother responsibilities kick in, and he limits her screen time to 3 hours. Since then, Charlotte has started acting childish, and his mother is scheming to get him and Charlotte close, so she can make their relationship permanent in the future. The next day, Gold leaves on a mission to put an end to the thieves, leaving Charlotte sad and worried about her father. She wishes that people would stop choosing the path of evil, and that the struggle for power is put to an end. Haruto asks her if she got that from an anime, but she suddenly turns to Haruto, and asks him to join the fight with her father. Haruto has no choice but to transform himself into a shady-looking costume, which Charlotte finds amazing. Haruto soon finds the thieves, and goes to confront them. He tries his best anime impression, and easily defeats the thieves. He is about to leave, when his dad and his soldiers arrive. Haruto cannot reveal his identity, so he continues playing the role of a cringe lord, and introduces himself as a protector of justice, and flies off. But since that day, Haruto finds himself in battle every day, and soon comes to be known as the Black Knight, and becomes Charlotte's hero. After months of hard work, Haruto is successfully able to create a robot that is surprisingly irritating like him. One day, the family has surprise visitors. They are the king and queen's children, Princess Marianne and Prince Laius, who are Haruto's blood siblings. Gold greets them, and Prince Laius talks down to Gold. He also challenges Haruto to a duel, because he thinks Haruto is scowling at him. They go to the yard and start their duel. Haruto thinks he has to take the beating, since he is the prince. But Laius asks him to fight back, so Haruto doesn't let a single blow hit him, and knocks the prince down multiple times, angering him. Suddenly, Laius uses his fire magic to attack Haruto, but Haruto absorbs the fireballs thrown at him using his shield magic, and threatens to throw all the fireballs merged into one massive ball back at Laius. But Laius drops to his knees, and accepts defeat. Marianne has been trying her best to stop Laius from making a fool of himself, and when their fight is over, Marianne apologizes to Haruto on behalf of her brother. She is curious to know if Haruto really is only level 2, which Haruto confirms, and excuses himself. He wonders if his birth parents are looking for him, but soon dismisses the thought because they discarded him as an infant without a second thought. He refuses to believe that they'll be searching for him after so many years. That night, Char informs Haruto about the bandits that are displayed on the magic screens. But Haruto feels overworked, since Char has taken the patrol too seriously. Flay enters, and tells Haruto that Char told her that he has been secretly going on missions. She asks why Haruto has not been taking her on missions recently. Haruto says that he thought she'd been busy, but Flay informs him that she's done with all her chores. Char hears that Flay wants to join Haruto, and she gets excited. She compares the situation to anime, and says that when a hero is in a pinch, their sidekick comes to the rescue, and Flay must be his sidekick. Flay decides to play along, making Haruto feel helpless. Haruto warns Flay that he does not want any graphic violence, since Char will be watching them. In the woods, the bandits are discussing how lucky they are with their loot. Haruto suddenly interrupts them, and when they ask who the intruder is, Haruto introduces himself as the Black Knight while posing. Flay comes out and introduces herself as the Crimson Knight and poses. The bandits are flustered, and Flay immediately starts to burn them alive, but Haruto tells her to stop. Flay is too into character and refuses, forcing Haruto to save the bandits with his barrier magic. As soon as Flay notices that the bandits are not burning, she casts another flame spell. But Haruto knocks her down with a hammer, and reminds her about his warning of no graphic violence. Flay replies that she remembers, but anyone who goes against her master is her enemy. Seeing that Flay is hopeless, Haruto tells her that he is going to deal the final blow to the bandits, so she can go back home. Flay thinks her master is kind, and happily agrees. Later that night, Haruto lays on his bed, as Char praises him and Flay. She says that it felt like she was watching a man's eye routine. Flay complains about her inability to finish off the bandits, as something got in her way, but she will finish them next time. But Haruto thinks to himself that there won't be a next time. Char is happy at the idea of watching more of their mission, and she also advises Flay on her finishing pose. But this makes Haruto wonder if he will ever be able to live a peaceful life as a loner. Elsewhere, Prince Laius is angry when he remembers how he was beaten by Haruto. He can't believe that he, the heir to the throne, was beaten by a worthless level 2. His butler asks for permission to enter the room, so they can dress him for the upcoming banquet. As he is being dressed up by the female servant, his butler advises him to ask Char to accompany him on his tour the next day. He isn't happy about it, but the butler tells him that it's an order from his dad, and he agrees. After the banquet, Char happily enters Haruto's room with Haruto's clone. She sees that she surprised Haruto, and immediately apologizes for not knocking. The clone is exhausted, and he complains to Haruto for forcing him to go to the banquet. He jumps into bed, and Char asks if the clone is alright, and tells Haruto that she's going on a tour with Prince Laius the next day. Haruto asks her why she has to go, and she replies that the prince sent her an invite. Haruto wonders if the prince is into little girls, so he decides to follow her for the tour. At night, Haruto decides to cover his bases with his surveillance system, since Char is going on the tour the next day. But he notices a group of people in cloaks performing a summoning ritual, so he decides to go see what they are doing. He announces his arrival, and asks if they have received permission from the Margrave Gold's Infis. The leader of the group thinks that Haruto has to be one of Gold's men, and tells his subordinates to attack him. Haruto decides not to hold back, and wipes them out. The leader of the group summons a group of skeleton soldiers, and commands them to attack Haruto. Haruto thinks they are freaky in real life compared to video games. The skeleton soldiers attack Haruto, but he easily breaks them into pieces. But the skeletons reassemble themselves, and Haruto gets overwhelmed by the skeleton group. But he summons a barrier and tosses them away. He notices a red gem in the chest of each skeleton. The leader of the cloaked men orders the skeletons to attack Haruto again, but instead the skeletons attack the group. The leader sees that he has no other choice, and summons a golem. Haruto can't believe that he gets to fight a real golem, and the golem instantly attacks Haruto. He defends himself with a barrier, but the golem's punch breaks his barrier, and smashes him against a tree. As soon as Haruto gets back on his feet, he acknowledges to himself that his defense is a bit weak. As he wonders how to deal with the golem, he notices a red gem on the golem's chest. He attacks it with a stake-shaped barrier, and causes the golem to attack the intruders. The leader of the group is confused why the golem is attacking them, and Haruto explains that his attack on the golem changed the magical formula of the golem, making it attack them. Hearing this astonishes the leader. After some time, the skeletons tie up the intruders, and Haruto questions the leader about why they intruded the area. The leader refuses to speak, so Haruto orders the skeletons to bury the rest of the group alive, except the leader. The leader can't stand the sight of his subordinates being buried, and confesses to Haruto that they were sent by the queen to kill Charlotte, after 2 squads were unable to kill her. Haruto almost makes the golem go berserk, but he calms down, and decides to protect Char and his family from anyone who tries to hurt them, even if the person is his biological mother. The next day in a carriage, Leius, Marianne, Haruto, and Char are on their tour. Charlotte notices that Leius looks sour, and tries to console him by telling him that he should not be sad about losing to Haruto. She says that it's normal, and he should be proud of being able to challenge Haruto in the first place. Haruto tries to stop Char and Leius from talking about it, but Leius shouts at Haruto, telling him that he does not need any pity from him. He asks Haruto how he won the duel without using any magic, and Haruto replies that he's the main character, so he self-augmented himself by telling himself to get strong. Leius and Marianne are shocked, and they ask him if he is a returned demon. Haruto asks what a returned demon is, and Charlotte explains to him that a returned demon is an offspring of a demon and a human, and they usually have extraordinary physical abilities and high mana. But since they don't see any physical defects in Haruto, they can't tell. Char explains that Haruto's skin is fair, and she can tell since she takes baths with Haruto, and the prince and princess are mortified that the two take baths together. When they get to the field, they exit the carriage and start running around the field. But Haruto goes to his dad and asks a hypothetical question about what his dad would do if the queen was after Charlotte. Gold realizes that Haruto must have noticed that something was wrong. He explains to him that he received a letter from the Black Knight the previous day, and after following the Black Knight's instructions, he saw the queen's men all tied up. Haruto tells his dad that he wishes a cruel queen like her would go away, but Gold explains to him that if the queen should leave the throne, the kingdom is likely to go through a civil war. He explains the history of how the queen was a hero who helped the king kill the demon king, after which she married the king, and they were supported by the masses. Haruto realizes the importance of the queen, and blames himself for not doing any research on his biological parents since he hated them. However, Gold tells him that if someone more powerful than the queen shows up, then they could overthrow her. Haruto asks him why he doesn't take the throne himself, and Gold replies that he knows nothing about politics. But he knows of someone who could, but that person is still young, and he wants to wait until that person becomes an adult. Haruto realizes that Charlotte is that person, and remember the words of the leader of the summoners, who told him that Charlotte has more potential than the queen. Haruto makes a vow to protect Charlotte, after which he will enjoy living his life as a shut-in in this fantasy world. Later, Haruto is walking with Flay, and Flay asks if she should go kill the queen. But he tells her not to, and that he has to kill her with his own hands. Flay happily agrees, and looks forward to that day. Haruto decides to go pay the queen a visit, as he is sure that she will meddle with his life in the future. In the castle, the queen asks her soldiers why they failed to kill Charlotte. One of the soldiers responds that a man who calls himself the Black Knight might be the person who has been stopping their attempts to kill Charlotte, and the soldier swears to pay back the Black Knight in the future. But the queen pours wine on his face. She explains how Charlotte might be a threat to her in the future, and she thinks about going after the Black Knight herself, with the holy sword she used to slay the Demon King. Suddenly, Haruto appears in the room, and asks if she wants to fight him. The soldiers surround the queen to protect her, but Haruto suffocates them with his barrier magic. Haruto introduces himself as the Black Knight, and when the queen asks how he got through the barriers around the palace, he tells her that they were sloppy. The queen acknowledges him as the Black Knight whom the citizens are talking about, and she casts 3 magic circles to attack Haruto. The queen traps Haruto in a sphere of water, but he uses his barrier magic to escape. She tries her other spells, but Haruto easily blocks them. The queen thinks she won, but she is surprised to see that Haruto isn't hurt by her attacks. She wonders who he is, and Haruto attacks her. She barely blocks the attack, and Haruto is impressed, and says he will stop holding back, and attacks again. The queen is losing mana from blocking the attack, and she decides to use her sword. Haruto blocks all of her attacks, but the queen pins him down. She starts praising herself as the strongest woman in the world, but Haruto laughs and says she isn't strong at all, and he defeats her. He punishes her by making her wear a magical slave collar. He advises her not to try removing the collar by force, as she might lose her head. He tells her that he will release her when he feels like it, as long as she leaves Gold's Empress and his family alone. The queen is humiliated and starts crying as Haruto leaves the room. Outside the room, Flay praises Haruto for what he did. But Haruto says that he won't show her mercy next time, and Flay praises him more. 5 years later, Haruto, Flay, and Charlotte are taking a walk in a field of snow. Haruto thinks about how the queen has not interfered with them for the past 5 years. He is now 15, and life has been peaceful. He starts complaining about the cold, and wants to stay closed up in his room. Charlotte shows him the transformation brooch she made, and Haruto thinks she's an anime nerd. Flay isn't impressed, and shows them her 3D model replica of the castle. Charlotte sees the snow castle, and compliments Flay. Haruto is shocked that Flay can make something like that, and thinks that she has so many useless skills that come out of nowhere. He notices that Flay is shivering, and asks her if she is cold, but she says she doesn't want to change out of the outfit that Haruto gave her. Haruto can't believe she's so dumb, and he magically changes her outfit to something warm. He tells her to always ask for his help if she ever needs it. So she tells Haruto that she needs his help with 20 things, but he instantly rejects her. Charlotte tells him that she needs his help with something. He can't say no, so he listens to her request and agrees, which makes Flay jealous. Haruto poses and says some embarrassing anime quotes, and he casts a spell that makes a giant hole in the ground. Charlotte can't contain her excitement and hugs Haruto. When Haruto sees Charlotte smiling, he thinks to himself that it's worth it to do these things, even though it is embarrassing. He suddenly realizes that this is how he has been getting roped into things like this every time. Suddenly his mom and dad arrive and ask what happened to the ground. Knowing that his secret identity might be exposed, Charlotte whispers something to him, and he summons a clone of the Black Knight. He tells his parents that the Black Knight damaged the ground when he showed them his special move. His dad is suspicious, but he agrees to leave the situation at that. Gold talks about how the queen has not come after them in the last 5 years, and there's a rumor that the queen is wearing a slave collar. Haruto tries to sneak away, but his dad informs him that he will start attending school in the royal capital in 3 months. Haruto freezes and thinks to himself that there is no way he's going to that hell known as school, since he was bullied at school in his previous life. He falls on his knees and decides he will have to put a new mission into action in order to hole up in his room for the rest of his life. In the castle, Gold tries to convince Haruto to attend the school, but Haruto refuses. Haruto thinks to himself that school is nothing more than a living hell. Gold sighs and reveals a recommendation letter from the king. He tells Haruto that he has no option but to go. Gold thinks he received a recommendation because of Princess Marianne, since she had taken an interest in him during the tour. He also thinks the queen might be behind it. Gold then tells him that as a father, he wants him to go out and see the world. Haruto is touched, but Gold also tells Haruto that he needs to take an attendant with him, and that Flay is not an option. He thinks about who he would take, and his eavesdropping mother volunteers herself, but he instantly refuses her, and Gold tells him that he still has 3 months to decide. When Haruto leaves the room, he thinks about how he can make sure he does not go to school. When he gets to his room, he speaks with his clone about attending school instead of him. Since the clone does not have magic, he will be expelled, and the blame will be on the king who recommended him. Haruto tells him that he will protect him with his barrier magic, and the clone realizes that Haruto does not care about him. Haruto says that he can replace him, and the clone freaks out and asks how many clones there were before him. Haruto calms him down and tells him that he is kidding, since Charlotte won't let him make another clone. The clone has a mental breakdown, but he finally agrees to the task. The next day, Haruto is in a log cabin away from the castle. He spent 5 years building it secretly, and is happy since nobody disturbs him here. Charlotte arrives to watch anime, and he asks why Charlotte hasn't been coming to his room lately. Charlotte says that she is taking lessons, and has been instructed not to go to his room all the time. She can only come to the log house if Flay brings her. She complains about not watching anime recently. Haruto tells her that he can help with that using his teleportation magic, but he hasn't tried it on living things. So Flay tells him to use his clone, and he makes a portal to his room. Haruto tries to convince the clone to go through the portal, but the clone knows that Haruto wants to use him as a lab rat, and mocks him. Flay can't take it anymore, and she goes through the portal, and beats up the clone. She throws him through the portal, and he makes it safely across, even though Flay tested it first. With his test complete, Haruto creates a door that leads directly to the castle. The next day, Charlotte is watching anime, while Flay performs her regular chores. Haruto is busy playing video games, when he suddenly gets Tourette's and yells, "Attendant!" Charlotte and Flay are confused, and Haruto quickly says he's going on a walk, and leaves out the door. He breathes a sigh of relief, as he doesn't want Flay to know he's looking for a school attendant, and thinks he still has 3 months to find one. As he's walking, he spots a path that seems suspiciously bright, so he decides to check it out, and steps into a village of skeletons. The skeletons see him, and they rush to welcome him. Their leader, Johnny, addresses him as his lord, and they salute him in unison. Haruto goes back in memory lane, and remembers defeating the skeleton army, who were called by the summoners 5 years ago. They started following Haruto after being defeated, so Haruto gave them some land, and they ended up settling down. Haruto notices some random monsters, and asks Johnny about them. Johnny tells Haruto they are stray monsters with nowhere else to go, as Flay has rounded them up from all over the province. Johnny assures Haruto that they are hidden from society, and all comply with Johnny's directions. Haruto is surprised that the village has grown since the last time he visited, but if the monsters are behaving there, he doesn't see any problem with them settling there in peace. Johnny tells him there are other districts too, and takes him on a tour. He shows Haruto the fields where they grow their crops, and Johnny bombards him with information about their cropping methods. Johnny suddenly cries tears of joy with other skeletons when they see vegetables growing that they could not grow last year, and Johnny says they will not have to starve this winter. Haruto can't believe everything they've done, and he thinks Johnny might be the perfect attendant. Since Johnny is polite, extremely loyal, and has a freakishly deep voice, Haruto thinks he would be perfect. But Johnny continues to ramble, and Haruto thinks he would go insane if he had to listen to that every day. He soon leaves the monster paradise, and sits by the lake. He thought the walk would help him relax, but it turned out to be exhausting. Suddenly everything starts shaking, and Haruto is launched in the air. As if expecting this to happen, he looks at Gigan, the Gigant Golem, and Gigan squats next to Haruto, and gives him a flower that looks ridiculously small compared to Gigan. Haruto takes it, and Gigan blushes like a little girl. Haruto thinks that Gigan might be a good attendant, but it's gigantic. Gigan suddenly confesses its love for Haruto, and he doesn't know what to do with this information. Haruto thinks he won't be able to find an attendant, and returns to the lodge where Flay is waiting for him. She looks annoyed, and asks Haruto what he means by an attendant, because she doesn't want a competition. Haruto can't believe she's only sharp-witted at times like this, and tells Flay it has nothing to do with her, and runs away with Flay crying. The next day, Haruto takes Flay and Charlotte to see the skeleton village. Charlotte names their settlement Pandemonium, which means quite the opposite of how Johnny perceives it, and is overjoyed. Somewhere else in a blizzard, a group of adventurers have come to hunt a blizzard dragon for its hefty bounty. But the dragon is heavily injured, and even as she tries to fly away, she eventually falls into an avalanche. Haruto, Flay, and Charlotte are back at the palace, and Gold discusses the discovery of the blue dragon outside of their territory. Even though the blue dragon is outside their region, Gold is concerned that it might enter their domain and cause problems. Gold asks Flay to go and handle the situation, but Flay refuses, saying she only follows Haruto's orders. Haruto glares at her, and says it is his order, making her more annoyed. She adds that a dragon that large couldn't have been born in the past several years. But she doesn't know any blue dragons, which means while the demons were busy waging war against humanity, the dragon must have been hiding in the mountains, and Flay refuses to help a coward like that. Haruto understands it is a touchy issue for Flay, and asks for time to consider the matter. As they leave Gold's office, they find Charlotte standing outside. She hears everything, and pleads with Flay to help the dragon. Her sparkling eyes and a little insistence from Haruto do the trick, and Flay agrees to help the dragon. Flay and Haruto, dressed as the Black Knight, reach the location, and they find the dragon using Haruto's surveillance screens. But the adventurers are nearby, so they hurry to reach the dragon. The adventurers find the injured dragon, and are about to attack it, when Haruto steps in and kicks one of the adventurers in the face. While Haruto heals the dragon, Flay yells at the adventurers for preying on the weak, and lights them on fire. Once the dragon is healed, she breathes on Haruto and freezes him, making Flay yell at the dragon. Haruto breaks the ice, and says it is okay because the dragon has been through a lot. She realizes that Haruto saved her, and the dragon starts talking to Haruto and Flay through telepathy. She senses Flay is a demon, and asks why she is serving a human. Flay takes an hour to recount the entire incident of their meeting, and the dragon believes it all, including the backstory about Haruto being the reincarnation of the demon lord. Haruto asks the dragon what she has been doing here, and the dragon first apologizes to Flay for not participating in the war, as she hates fighting. She says that she has lived a peaceful life in hiding for 300 years. Haruto is suddenly interested in hearing her story, and thinks the dragon has been a shut-in on a whole new level, and he aspires to be on her level. The dragon tells him that initially she curled up and spent most of the days in her cave, but one night, a traveler spent the night in the cave, and left a book behind. The dragon read the book many times, and before she knew it, she had come out of hiding to the town to read more books. She transformed herself into a girl, and bought books from the town. After doing this infinite times, she built her own library and gained knowledge. But one day the adventurers discovered her, and they burned down her books, and chased her out of her den. Flay cries her eyes out, and agrees to shelter her at Pandemonium. The dragon agrees, and she shows thanks Haruto for saving her, and takes him as her master, promising to serve and protect him all her life. She transforms into human form, and Haruto is careful to give her a cute maid outfit, and not a catsuit as he did to Flay, and names her Liza. She thanks Lord Haruto, when Flay jumps in, and makes it very clear that she was the first to serve Haruto. But when Haruto takes off and asks them to follow, Liza spreads her wings, and flies with Haruto, while Flay burns with jealousy, and runs as if her life depends on it, refusing to lose to a dragon. Haruto and Flay return to the palace with Liza, and introduce her to his family. He says that Liza wants to work in the palace as a maid, and Natalia thinks she's adorable. Gold can't believe this is the dragon they discussed, and agrees to hire her as long as she follows the castle rules. Soon after, Flay begins Liza's training, and teaches her different cleaning methods, which mostly ends with Flay breaking everything, while Liza effortlessly completes the tasks. She even earns appreciation from other maids, and surprises the family with a delicious dinner. Natalia is curious to know what other things Liza is capable of doing, and Liza replies that she loves reading books, and she understands the basics of magic, 300 years worth of the basics. Natalia can't contain her excitement, and appoints Liza as Charlotte's personal maid. Flay is sulking in the corner, and Haruto prays that she doesn't lose her temper, and burn everything to the ground. The next day, Liza starts as Charlotte's maid, and helps her get ready for her day, and begins teaching her magic. Within a day, Charlotte is able to create a massive fireball, and proudly shows it to Haruto. Haruto is impressed, and asks Liza about the water ball hovering over her head. Liza explains she is doing the laundry while teaching Charlotte magic, leaving Haruto shocked at how competent she is compared to Flay. He apologizes for making Liza do all sorts of work, and Charlotte asks if she's overworking her, but Liza says she loves serving Charlotte. Charlotte is moved to tears, and asks Liza to be her friend, and Liza happily agrees. Their bond almost glows, nearly blinding Haruto. Suddenly he realizes that Liza might be the perfect attendant that he's been looking for. But he thinks he realized it too late, and jiggles away depressed. But he comes up with an idea. He plans to use his teleporting door so that he can overwork her even more, so she can be both his and Charlotte's attendant. Now he can finally focus on his mission to get expelled early from school. Later that day, Charlotte can't believe her favorite anime show has ended. But Haruto tells her that a new episode will start next week. Liza reminds Charlotte her break time is over, and as they are about to leave, Haruto tells them that he will be attending school in the royal capital starting next week. Charlotte freaks out, and mumbles to herself about terrorists and magic battles. She tells Liza to cancel all her plans for the day, and tells her to summon all of the knights. Haruto is extremely confused, and Charlotte yells that there will be a round table conference. Liza, Flay, Charlotte, Johnny, and Gagan immediately gather in the woods. And Charlotte tells them that the meeting must be kept a secret. Charlotte breaks the news to them, and says Haruto will start attending school in the royal capital next week. A wave of panic washes over them, and Flay slams her fists on the table, saying she can't believe Haruto didn't inform her about his plans. Charlotte asks Flay to calm down, saying she also just heard of this for the first time. Flay doesn't understand why Haruto needs to go to school and almost reveals Haruto's identity as the Demon King. But Johnny stops her mid-sentence and reminds her about their promise not to talk about it. Charlotte suddenly jumps from her seat and realizes that something about Haruto is being kept a secret from her. She turns to Flay and Liza, but they both turn their faces the other way. Charlotte is shocked, but Johnny tells Charlotte that Haruto loves her the most, which makes her more important than any of them. Charlotte blushes, and Johnny assures her that Haruto will tell her the secret someday, so Charlotte agrees to let the issue go. Liza can't believe that worked, and Charlotte resumes the meeting, asking why Haruto would willingly go to school. She remembers that once she was watching an anime about school, and when she asked Haruto about it, Haruto told her that school is an extremely scary and dangerous place. She continues, saying that Haruto is not scared of anything, but there must be a reason why he finds school scary. She presents her anime-based theory, and says that the school has a hidden student council, leading honest students down the path of evil. She claims that the council makes them fight in magical battles, only to crush them using dirty tricks. And behind all of this, there's an evil mafia that could destroy the kingdom. She believes that Haruto wouldn't let that happen, which is why he is going to fight them as the Black Knight. Flay, Liza, and Johnny are fired up, and believe every word Charlotte just said without question. Charlotte figures that Haruto will install the teleportation door in the capital, and she intends to use it to take Flay and Liza along to gather information. She asks Johnny and Gigan to prepare for what is to come. However, Liza feels they should discuss the matter with Haruto, but the others think that they shouldn't bother Haruto with such trivial matters, and decide to put their plan into action. That night, Liza narrates the entire meeting to Haruto, and he thanks her for the update. Liza asks if he is actually fighting the mafia. Haruto is shocked she actually believed Charlotte, but he thinks she is honest by nature, so he says he will be fighting the evil alliance, and that he has been acting in secret all along. He asks Liza to accompany him to the capital as his attendant, in order to assist him with his fight against evil. Liza agrees, and he is overjoyed that his plan actually worked. All that is left is to get himself kicked out of school, and then he can finally live his dream life as a loner. He dismisses Liza, and falls on his bed. And that brings us to this episode of Am I Actually the Strongest? We hope to see you next time.